Hi guys, I am Rakib. I'll go ahead with a little slight introduction for those of us who have not been to our conversation circles before. I am Rakib. I'm our Youth Affinity Group lead at UNA USA, and this is our project at the intersection of AI and the Sustainable Development Goals. Every week we are organizing a virtual open dialogue floor for to discuss the potentials, the positive potential of AI, explore some of the negative impacts of AI in each SDG space. Every week, discussing a new SDG as we go. And most importantly, we're bringing in youth speakers who are taking initiatives to make an impact on their own local communities, sort of taking local action for a global impact, a motto we go by here at UNA USA. I will wait for. Okay. Ray, let me know once we have everyone in and okay. Um, Quick thing before we get started, Diego is one of our speakers for today. Unfortunately, Federico, who was one of our other speakers, had to cancel very, very last minute. But I think we'll still have a great session regardless. Diego's working on an amazing project for Nittany AI Alliance here at Penn State University, with some of us who are from Penn State as well. And so I'm excited to explore how his project kind of ties into the SDG of zero hunger. And we'll have Federico at a future conversation circle later in the month. So excited for that as well. And he was feeling really sick and was unable to kind of hop in, wishing him the best of health. Hope he feels better soon. So we can go ahead and kind of get started with Diego. Hey Diego, hope you're doing well, dude. Great to
Hey
have you
everyone.
here. Yeah, great. I'll let you have the floor for the time being, kind of introduce yourself and the project that you're working on and how you got started with Nini AI.
Sure, definitely. So the project that we are working on, first of all, can you guys hear me? I
Yep.
I, I had some trouble with the audio before joining. I wasn't sure. But the project that we're working on has to do with crop damage, especially in PA, since PA is or well, it's always had a problem with deer because PA has a great population of deer around the state. It's always had a problem of deer, and especially in general wildlife, especially deer, eating the crops, going into the farms, the plantations, and just eating the crops around, especially around the farm area and the areas where it intersects with the forests. Um, so we are working on a project where we can identify those deer and the frequency of the deer around the crop area, around the farm, and how much damage they are doing to the crops so that um it can be properly measured. Because a problem that farmers have is that sometimes when they try to account for the damage that deer do in their farm, when deer come in and eat their crops around the year, they have no way of accurately measuring how much damage the deer do, because they just like occasionally just walk in and eat the crops without like no warning. You don't know when the deer is going to come in. You don't know when the deer is not going to come in. So there's no way for you to accurately measure that. What we are doing is taking images of the farm, around the farm, setting up cameras, setting up drones. Well, we haven't gotten to that part yet, but hopefully in the future, having aerial images of the entire farm, dividing it into grids and calculating the frequency of the deer, how many deer there are, how big they are, because that also affects the amount of food they eat, um, and the influence of those deer in the damage of the overall farm. Because it's not only deer damaging the crops, right? You have like certain diseases that might affect the crops. You have climate conditions and all that kind of stuff. So we are trying to measure, or at least for the beginning part of the project, do an estimate on how much damage deer do to the crops themselves.
Got it. Got it. Very, very interesting project. We'll definitely get into the technical side of things here. But before we do, I think this ties very, very well actually with our sort of second sustainable development goal of zero hunger, where we're tackling, or the United Nations kind of outlines several different sort of indicators and targets around the globe for world leaders to kind of take action based on. We had a something called the Pact of the Future that was adopted last year in November at the UN General Assembly in New York City, and a lot of the points that that very document kind of, or the pact outlined, was regarding food security in especially the global south, and kind of working on in the farms of PA, and not even the global south. We realized that the global north isn't necessarily kind of out of this realm of food security issues. So we even face issues of these sort, and learning from the surroundings that we're at is probably the best step forward, the best first step to take in tackling it in a global sense. So that definitely is a great way to kind of go about. Yeah, there you go. So there's some resources we can check out in the chat to know more about the Pact of the Future specifically. Diego, I would love to know more a little bit on how you guys came about with the project, or were you there since its conception, and how you got involved in it.
Sure, definitely. Um, so at the beginning, when it was first being like talked about, and you know, in its start, well, we some people at Nittany AI were talking about how much deer, just casually talking about how the damage that deer do to the farms in PA, because they had some friends, some farmer friends, which we actually worked along with during the project, that always kept complaining about how much the deer are just walking in the farm and eating the crops. But that soon enough, that conversation transitioned into a moment where we went, wait a minute, what if we just work on this? We are talking about this. Why don't we work on this? We have this whole organization focused towards making AI improve the world. Well, let's work on this. So it was idealized as a project in AI. And for those of you that don't know, Nate AI is a organization in Penn State where we, well, we saying we is a bit of a, I don't know if an overstatement. The staff at Nate AI think about these projects, and then they assign it to a group of students that are willing to work on the project and are willing to bring in ideas and just willing to bring it to fruition. So it was one of these projects. I was around when it was thought about, when it was being talked about, and I got together with a great group of students, a great team that allowed us to bring this project forward, bring a proof of concept first to at least real to at least see if it was possible in the first place. And And yeah, we were giving the very basics on how we would go about or what we had to do. It was really confusing at the beginning because we had no idea on how we would do this. It was just, they just like threw at us, hey, measure how much damage deer do. And we were like, okay, how are we going to do that? But um, it was really interesting talking to the farmers, going to the farms. We did go to the farms, seeing all the damage that deer do around the area. You could especially see, as I said, around the areas where the farm intersects with the forest. You could see like these U-shaped areas where the deer just walk in, eat, and leave. And you could also see, which is why I mentioned earlier that deer are not the main cause of crop damage in PA. You could also see areas in the middle of the farm where there are circles, and those circles are mainly groundhogs that go underground and get into the farm and just eat from the center of it. And it gives you an insight on how much food actually is. I mean, I don't want to say wasted because the deer eat it, but in a way, how much food is not being lost by these animals.
Yeah, I think that's actually very, very cool insights that you can kind of derive from visually looking at it from a data perspective and not just kind of playing the guessing game. Oh, I think this is the part that the deers took out. I think this is the part that like the groundhogs kind of affected and whatnot. So when you kind of look at it from a data perspective, when you look at it holistically in a visual manner, you kind of now have some actions that you can take that are going to be data driven, some actions that are going to be, more
Right.
impactful than others and can actually, tackle the problem that you're solving. So kind of segueing into my next question is what are some actions that the farmers can take based on the insights that your AI models or the softwares are able to provide?
Well, that is something that is kind of difficult because
Hmm.
at the beginning we were talking about, since we didn't want to go around in circles doing the same thing over and over again, we were talking to the farmers and we were talking to big groups of people about what are the approaches that they already took. And I'll tell you that list was long. That was a long list. Getting the deer away from those crops was not an easy task. But initially, what we thought about was, as I said, just looking at from the overall view of the farm, you could see the damage. It was distinct. You had the U shapes, you had the circles in the center of the crops, and all those things. The beginning, we just thought about like detecting the different colors
Hmm.
in the crops themselves, but that wouldn't be enough because there are a lot of causes that might cause that. And we ended up coming up with just that approach I told you, with having the cameras and detecting the deer, detecting the size, detecting the frequency, the size of the group itself, and that can that can help, let's say, measure the amount of damage that it can do to it with the insights that come from the model, and having an estimate of that, let's say, damage that the deer do to the crops. It can give you, well, that's what it gives you. It gives you an insight of the damage that it does to the farm itself. Uh, we haven't gotten as far into the what can we do to prevent this aspect of the thing, because what we focused on first was trying to measure how much damage it was done. Because yeah, you'd be surprised the lack of knowledge that we have on how much these animals do. There's no like, we cannot tell how much they will do. They just go in, they go other animals. They act on the free will. Oh well, they have special certain behaviors that we also kept in mind when developing all this. Like some deer, just for the entirety of their lives roam around a certain area. It's not even that big of a radius, but it's still, even if it's a specified discrete area they roam around in, there's still outliers that walk out and they still move around however they want, and even if it's inside of that area. So there's no telling on how much damage they will do in a specific amount of time. So that was what we mainly focused on, trying to approximate or calculate how much damage they did, rather
Got it.
than finding ways to prevent it.
Yeah. And the fact that you say that yeah, we haven't gotten to the point where the step two of what actions you can take based on these insights. Great that this is a conversation circle and it's an open dialogue floor so we
Right.
can bounce ideas off of each other and kind of figure out what we can kind of do from these insights here in this session. And we have a lot of kind of our members here who are in audience today kind of come from the tech sort of background to a sort of AI and the sustainability space itself. So it only makes up for a more interesting conversation that way. When there are certain things that are left out of the equation, then it's only there for us to be filling it. So excited to move it over to the audience in a minute, but once you when we were kind of thinking about like the when we were as we were just talking about the actions that farmers could take, I was one thing that kind of came to my mind immediately. Let me know kind of the feasibility of it, and if that could be an action that they can even take. Maybe even just knowing where the damage is happening, or what scale the damage is kind of taking place, which, like you said, was previously unknown before these data-driven insights kind of came into play. So, and now, because now you know where these groundhogs are gonna be, maybe you can take preventative measures before planting the crops. Maybe there could be protective measures that you can take on. Maybe this is a certain fence area that the deer sort of come here often, and these are data that you can totally visualize and kind of come up with using your AI models. Yeah, so preventative measures I'm assuming could be a great way to kind of go about for farmers. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, the main driving factor of the project and what started the project going was that the farmers wanted a specific number, well, uh, 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 at least a range of approximate values where the damage could be quantified, so that they could go to insurance companies and show them how much the deer have done to their farm. Because before, they used to go and you could talk to an insurance company and say, hey, the deer did this amount of damage to my farm throughout the year, but you had no data, you had no way you could explain, like, you could prove that that was the amount of damage that was done to your farm. So the insurance companies, they seldom helped farmers when it came to that. They did, well, they do in some ways, but it is still difficult to prove how much damage the deer have actually done. Using this data, they can actually go and show that using technologically backed data, using AI and all these technologies, they can show the insurance companies, at least more with more of a background and more of a base to claim their arguments. Um, they can show them how much damage the deer have done to their crops, and they can get help from the insurance companies or their money back to invest it even more in the crops and kind of make up for that for those lost crops.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's super interesting that you kind of even that's why I wanted to know the origins of a lot of these projects that kind of start up, especially youth initiatives. Because we, not to sound super cliche, but we think of ways that a lot of people kind of don't think about. You know, we think in routes that a lot of traditional thinkers or conventional thinkers wouldn't take. And that's it's actually very cool kind of knowing how, in a sense, big insurance companies are exploiting the lack of knowledge of farmers
Yeah,
who, yeah, I don't think that's very far off from reality, that they fully being aware of that these farmers don't know the data and they won't be able to prove the damage that they actually kind of go through, are are glad to give them insurance services and not follow through on it, because they know the farmers won't be able to kind of back up their claims on, hey, this is what I just went through, can you help me out? No, because you don't have any way to kind of prove it. Well, now you do. So yeah, I think this
exactly.
is an incredible way to kind of go about helping them either
Yeah,
as
and,
well.
and
Yeah.
it's really interesting as well because as we talked to farmers and all this group of people that worked in this field, we have come to an observation that farmers don't really like implementing technology in their farm, or at least the ones we talked to. Well, not the ones we talked to, but at least because we were working along with a group of farmers that were willing to implement technology in their farms. Those were the ones that came up to us and wanted to at least um, provide us with their farm and their crops as sort of a uh, let's say a playing field so that we can gather data and do all these experiments and stuff. But as we talk to them and all the people that got us around this project and then all the resources and all that, they have told us and we have gathered the information that farmers don't really like implementing technology such as this in their farms because they don't have the knowledge that on how much it can help them. And I don't blame them. This is their living, and making such a big investment on stuff that they don't know much about could be a big risk, you know. But at the same time, having this fear around these technologies could, I guess, keep it from going further. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Again, another very cool insight on I think we touched on it a little bit in our last conversation circle last week. Farmers and the idea of kind of data privacy. I was very unaware of a situation of that sort where they are concerned of kind of sharing their data about their farming data, some so their farming practices data and stuff like that. So something you wouldn't necessarily expect, like, hey, why are you so worried about, your data privacy? We're just trying to ask like how you farm and your farming practices. But they really are. And this is also another very cool insight, and I would love to open the floor up to the audience in a second. I know Anna as well as a Vice Navy were kind of interested in like the farming, the agriculture, and the food security sort of fields, and how AI and the big data kind of plays into this sector. I'd love to open the floor up to you guys as well as the rest of us on what you've heard so far, and some of the really cool kind of novel insights that we've learned. Again, farmers hesitating to use technology. I'd love to explore with the audience here. Why do we think that's so? Do we know of other instances that are just as similarly interesting, where we wouldn't really expect a hesitancy or a hesitation from a certain demographic implementing technology, especially farmers? That's something that I personally didn't know was actually a thing, but great to know that it is, and we can further explore. So, anyone in the audience is welcome to kind of raise your hand, and we can go ahead and begin an open dialogue discussion for the second half of the meeting. I know this, we only have one speaker today. Unfortunately, one of our other speakers couldn't make it, like we said before. But yeah, I think an open dialogue floor would definitely facilitate the situation. Here, Akdas Darwish, I see your hand raised at first. Please, the floor is yours.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well. First of all, I'm immensely honored to be in this conversation. I'm currently studying at the United World College's UWC USA. So, using technology and AI to keep the deer away from crops is an innovative and effective idea. I truly loved it. However, I have a question from the speaker. Do you think this advancement could also deepen global inequalities? While wealthier nations and large scale farms might have easy access to such technologies, many smaller farms in developing countries may not have the resources to implement it. And this could widen the gap in agriculture efficiency and food security, making it even harder for underprivileged farmers to compete. And how do you think we can ensure that this kind of technology remains accessible and beneficial, like to everyone involved? Yes, thank you.
That's
Yeah,
a
Diego, I'll
that's
let
a
you have
really
it. I
good
think that's
question.
yeah, I think that's very interesting, Diego, all you.
That is a really good question. Well, um, depending on the technology that is being used to implement it on the farm, the technology that is used to implement is gonna be a very, very big, it's gonna have a very big influence on the cost of this. Because right now, I wouldn't say that the technology we're using is very expensive. We are just merely using pictures and, let's say, overall farm images to detect the activity of the deer. And the models are not very resource expensive. Like the latest model we've used, I rendered on my laptop, and it's not that very good. But I would say that we are working in a proof of concept. It is not something that is, at least for now, meant to go into production. But I do believe that once it does go into production, the costs are going to skyrocket. That's much, it's going to skyrocket a lot because the technology is going to increase. There might be drones involved. There might be real-time video involved. There might be very a lot more powerful models involved. And I do believe that it might affect inequality, because running, and uh we have seen it lately, running really expensive models requires a lot of money, because it requires a lot of data centers, and it requires a lot of let's say uh raw power for that to say. But I do think that running it in a very, at least, bare bones way, or at least getting an estimate, which is what we're doing, getting an estimate on how much the damage done is, but how much the deer do. I don't think it's uh that expensive. And I'm sorry if I'm not answering your question, or probably it's a really good question, but at the same time, it's really difficult to answer, because I do agree that if being implementing it properly and implementing it so that it works really well and is very effective is gonna have a big it's gonna affect the cost a lot.
I agree. And Diego, thank you for kind of taking it that way. I kind of want to reiterate that not all questions are meant to be, just questions to be answered, but more like food for thought, where a lot of us are to kind of think about certain concerns relating to advancements and other sort of, really cool positive points that we bring up might come with hidden sort of negative consequences of it. So it is great that we are to be mindful of what comes with certain benefits that we push forward. So, like you said, it is essential to keep these models lightweight. So, a lot of people, so accessibility is not a concern for the global south, where internet infrastructure and computational infrastructure isn't necessarily the strongest in the world. So, keeping models lightweight as well as keeping costs at a minimum is something that's very, very important. That you highlighted is I think governmental sort of steps, and that the public sector in these global south economies are to take, and a certain sort of a call to action almost towards these governmental entities that are present in the global south uh,
Yeah.
should ensure for increased accessibility of their own people. Vice Navi, yes, the floor is yours.
Hi, Diego. First of all, this is some amazing work that you're doing. Really, really
Thank you.
inspiring. So one question I had was, I think you touched on this earlier, but it was about, how do we convince these farmers for adopting these technologies? And I think this is a question I had, especially for the Global South. Beyond just like, for detecting damages done by deer or like other animals, AI could be used for like crop disease detection or flood forecasting with satellite data. And I was looking at all these possible use cases like a few years earlier, and but my concern was, how do I actually convince these farmers that how do these AI is good for them, get their data. And I think you mentioned something about like they might not necessarily know how helpful it can be. So what are some ways you think we can, like, as technologists, um, programmers basically, and work with them and convince them and give them that information so that way, we can help them.
Yeah, that is also a really good question. You guys are really good questions. Well, um, definitely a way we can convince them, and this is something we talked about a lot while working on the project, is with results. With the people that we are working with, they are already willing to implement this technology on their farms, and they are giving us data and giving us all this. If we achieve to bring actual change to their farms, or we achieve to complete what we have in mind or what we have envisioned, we can use that to leverage our arguments that this is actually beneficial to their farms. These results can we can use these results to show them that this can have great impact on their field or on their farm specifically. We're talking to clients and stuff. But something else that I'd like to add is that sometimes when we're working with technology and we are working like we get so invested in these projects, we get so invested in the technology, we get so invested in the AI, all the things that we are using, that sometimes we forget our human part, our human side of the project. And I think that having a talk with them, showing how impactful it can be, just relating to the problems that they have, and just sitting down, showing them the entire process, teaching them how it all works, and taking time of our day to show them all the insights that we have in this, how we can show them how it all works, our motivations. It can go a really long way. I know it sounds kind of cliche saying, "Oh, we sit down, we talk to them, and they're soon gonna realize how good it is," but I've realized that if you sit down with someone and you show them how it all works, and you do that effort of trying to explain what we are doing, even if it doesn't make them change their minds, it'll have a thought, and they'll start thinking about it. And once they start thinking about it, then you can show them the results, and you can show them all of the things you've done and all that. And it's gonna just go down the hill, and it it can happen. It can be achieved.
I agree, Diego, and I really love that you took sort of like a humane approach to the concern that to such an incredibly valid concern that Vaishnavi kind of brought up. And I wholeheartedly actually agree. It is we're at the end of the day human beings. We are developing the AI models and such. We are not the AI. We're not insurance companies looking for impact claims with concrete data numbers. These numbers and stuff are crunched by machines, and it's not our job. Our minds and hearts are very much qualitative as opposed to quantitative, and I think we are more moved by qualitative sort of assessments, and one of them being the emotional appeal as a human being, kind of learning about the humane side of why this technology should be adopted by a farmer if I am to be a farmer, and how it benefits me in more humane ways than as opposed to, hey, you're gonna get this much more crops as opposed to this many specific impact numbers. The impact numbers only take you so far with a human mind, and I fully agree. And yeah, Brooke, you had your hand raised. All yours.
Hey, Diego, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I think everyone here also really appreciates you talking here and sharing your knowledge. Fascinating work that you're doing. I think I wanted to ask you two questions. I wanted to know two things. So the first thing would be, what kind of ethics and practices do you guys maintain to make sure that whatever data is being used is being, sorry, whatever data is being collected and aggregated and, kind of implemented in these farms is being used for good, in terms of like not harming the ecosystem, not harming animals, not harming the local like landfills, saying that, oh, there seems to be a lot of pests or a lot of insects, a lot of damage on this side that leads them to use more pesticides that could harm the environment. Like, what kind of things in terms of that do you guys maybe practice? The second thing would be, from your own personal experience with these farmers, where do you think their intentions or their perspectives on like following certain practices, in terms of like, I'm basically trying to figure out like how much do they really care about the animals that are trying to eat their crops? Like, do they like consider them, oh yeah, they're still animals, but we just want to protect our environment, or it's more like, yeah, let's get rid of all these animals. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to gauge,
Yeah, yeah.
experience with these farmers. What do like where are their minds at in terms of, ethical practices?
And Diego, you did
Yeah.
mention it is, before you answer, sorry, you did mention it's a proof of concept at the end of the day still. And before you go to production, it's very difficult to kind of gauge what happens afterwards, which is something, a question along the lines of what Brooke asked. I would love to kind of for you to answer. What do you think could be some of the steps that farmers could take to be mindful of the flora and the fauna that are present in these areas, while kind of using pesticides and being mindful of the people that the food goes to at the end of the day? Yeah. So what are some steps do you think that they could be taken, even with the help of the data models that you guys are creating and stuff?
Yeah, sure. First of all, the some of the steps we are taking in order to not affect the fauna, not affect the flora and the fauna around the area. We're really, let's say, this is gonna sound kind of weird, but in order to not affect it, we are basically doing nothing. We are just planting the cameras there, taking the pictures, letting them roll, not doing anything else. Not going in and trying to move. We try to go in as least as possible. We try to have an effect on the overall area, like at the least effect we could have, because if we don't do that, then the data we collect is going to be unnatural. It's going to affect the actual behavior of these animals. It's going to affect the actual behavior of these plants, because it's going to have our influence inside of the data, right? So we just try to put these cameras in there. We actually just have sticks with the camera on top, just planted in the farm, just looking over the entire thing. We have like only 3 spots. We don't have that many. And when we are to take pictures of the farm, we don't do it that often because the drones will scare the deer away. So we try not to do it that often. We just try to take pictures from really high up of the entire area. Sometimes we just go down. If we just want to look at the farm, we go down and we take pictures of the entire area, and we just do them in separate areas and stitch them together. We don't try to manipulate the thing inside of the farm that often, because it's gonna, at the end of the day, it's gonna affect the data we collect. It's gonna have our influence into it. As far as the interest of the farmers, so the other question, I would be lying if I said that they really care about these animals. I don't want to say that they don't. I would also be lying if I said that they don't, but their interest, and I don't blame them. This is their livelihood. This is where they get their money from. This is their job. And when you have all these animals just taking your crops away, taking your livelihood away, basically, or a big part of it away, you will take a lot of, you're trying to look for a lot of measures and all these ways to keep them away. So I really appreciate the farmers that are working along with us, because they are they're looking for ways to keep them away without harming them. But they have also, in conversations we have had, they are also confessed to us that sometimes they just get a bunch of deer and they have to go out there and start shooting. But that's just, it is, in some way you could say that they really don't care about these animals. But if you think about it, this is their livelihood. This is what they eat from. This is where they get their money. So in some way, they have some sort of justification for doing what they are doing.
Interesting. Sorry if you had.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you, what was your
Oh yeah, no,
third question? Sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna just comment on the two answers that you had. The first one I absolutely loved, the fact that you went, yeah, so kind of to go about making things more complex, we actually do nothing. And I think that's the true essence of less is more at times, where you don't always have to have the most complex sort of, like sometimes we just kind of lose the essence of why we're doing something, and we continue to add layers of complexity to just just add to the negative impact of a certain software solution, certain technology solutions that are there in the world today. But the whole idea of kind of keeping it as simple as possible, and sometimes a way to kind of mitigate a problem is just taking a step back instead of taking 2 steps forward. And that was a very, very cool way, in my opinion, especially given in a very low tech environment, low infrastructure environment, such as farmlands and in the global south. So I think that's an incredible, actually, way, an approach, a very practical approach to kind of going about it. And The second thing that you said was very practical, very realistic. Yes, at the end of the day, these people are here seeking help to kind of increase yield, to reduce the damage that they kind of face in their lives, in their livelihoods at these farms. And yeah, that's how they eat, live, and move forward with life, and just sometimes you got to care for yourself than the animal that comes and eats your crops. So one way that I kind of want to add is the fact that they're seeking sort of advanced help from youth initiatives and change makers like yourself shows that they care. Otherwise, they would have just shot the deers anyways in the first place, and would have not looked for novel solutions in the first place. So I think that is a sign, number one, kind of step one, to caring about the environment and the ecological diversity that there is around them in the first place. So very, very cool sort of insights. And I just kind of also want to reiterate, the audience can totally feel free to add to the answers of our speaker, as well as feel free to answer questions that are posed by other audience members. So this is an open dialogue at the end of the day, not a question answer series. So it can totally be that way, but yeah, feel free to kind of chime in with thoughts and opinions as opposed to just questions as well. That is totally okay, and if anything, more encouraged. With that said, Catherine, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for your time today. And I hope my questions are going to be a little bit simpler. I think taking a step back. So how, I guess, just to kind of gain, and you may have touched on this a little bit earlier, but to just kind of get the full picture, how many farms are you currently servicing?
Right now, we're just working with one farmer.
Okay, so you're just working
Yeah.
with one. And the crops, and I guess so then my next kind of questions would be, as you're looking at, expanding, or the next farm that you're working with, or the next set of farmers, how is it with the data that you have? If you were to take, what are the current crops, I guess, and then you were to take a different farm, a different set of farmers, and a different set of crops, does it, have you been going long enough to see kind of the disparities between the seasons, or between crops, or between, and just kind of how that impacts deer flow, and how hunting seasons play into deer and the amount of deer in the population in the project, or in the pictures that you're taking? Are you also marking for high season, or for when you can't, breeding, et cetera, and kind of more on the deer population control side?
Yeah, sure. Well, at the beginning of the project, we went to a farm that is not the one that we're working with. We went to a farm, like actually a farm from our university, owned by our university, and that's where we saw the damage done by the deer, all the U shapes and the circles, by the groundhogs and all that. And they had different types of crops. What we noticed there is that we we shouldn't rely solely on the colors of the plants just to base it like, oh, this plant has a disease, or this plant was munched on by the deer, so that's why it looks like this and stuff like that, because the plants or the different crops have an effect on the overall color of the farm, because depending on the season, different plants look different colors depending uh, on how close they are to getting harvested, or how damaged they are, or what disease they have. The crops have a really big effect on the overall data collection. Something else is that some farms have less forest areas. As I said, the areas where the deer eat the most crops are the areas where the farm intersects with the forest. So some farms have second to none like areas where they intersect with the forest, and some other farms are completely surrounded by forests. That also affects the amount of deer that go into the farm and affect the crops. And
And
I don't know
so,
if that answers your
yeah,
question.
it did. And I guess my follow-up to that is, I think in our political climate, when it comes to rural areas and rural farming, and you kind of throw the words in data, or you throw in AI, kind of the hesitation that comes with that. And I think the vulnerability and exposure that, they may or may not, whether, you're going out and you're shooting deer, and you're not supposed to be, or just kind of some of the exposures that come along with it. What is kind of is there a plan of connotation surrounding it? Or, I think that while you have the data and the research, it's a great piece to educate, I think, farmers, and not only farmers, but the people that you're working with, and just the awareness of, we may be collecting the data, but this is how it's going to be used. This is how AI can be implemented in a way that is palatable to their current situation. And I know that a lot of probably don't even have Wi-Fi or broadband access, right? When we're thinking, I think, in long term of huge farms or data, and just kind of how that's being stored in a way that someone who may not have the highest level of technology can understand it. But how does, really keeping to the point of, how does this apply to my everyday life? How is this going to benefit me? And, how can I work with you to benefit as well?
Definitely, yeah. Some conversations we've had along while working on the project are that this amount of all these data we're gathering, or the types of data we're gathering, or the methods we use to gather data, we try to be broad while collecting them and while working along with them, because we believe that at the end of the day, or at the end of the project, all these insights that we're getting from all this data can be used in other projects, or can be just used to show farmers things that they want to know about their farm. So things that we gather from all this data, like when you're working on a project like this, there's a lot of data that can go to waste by either cleaning the data to feed it into the model, or by just pivoting on the way you're approaching the project and stuff like this. So by collecting all this, we are trying to have an approach where nothing will go to waste. Everything we're doing can be used in some way to help farmers get knowledge or gain knowledge from their own farms, and get ideas for future projects that they would like to work on, and how they want to implement AI on their own farms and stuff.
Well, thank you again. I commend the work that you're doing, and I know that, recognizing that each farmer is kind of, I wouldn't say out for themselves, but at the end of the day, the same competition, you're working with the same crops. It is, I think, a leap that it'll be interesting as your project expands, how many people you can get on board. Oh, you're taking data from this farm. Well, I compete with this farm. And I think that those are some of the things that I think about as we've been talking about this today. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Cassie. Very, very interesting point. And again, more of the humane side of things. Just kind of taking a step back, like you said, from the technology aspect of it, the competition aspect, the capitalism aspect, in a sense. At the end of the day, these are livelihoods of people that are depending on their not only just their own food security, but their food security ensures food security of our people like ourselves who don't grow food, grow our own food and go buy what they grow. So very, very interesting sort of discussion there. Anna, you
Yeah.
had your hand up.
Hey, Diego. It's been a great discussion so far. I actually got a lot of powerful insights, and I just wanted to introduce like a cybersecurity tech perspective, since that's what the field I'm in currently. And I work with a lot of tools that analyze a lot of sensitive data. And from our previous discussions, we learned that farmers actually have a lot of privacy concerns, and that ties along with hesitancy. So my question's kind of more so just sparking from my personal curiosity, because I'm just fascinated by the project. So I just want to know the tools that you've been using currently. I have experience with ArcGIS and TerraShark, Habitat Edge, and tools like that. So I just wanted to know the existing tools. Also, again, bouncing off of Catherine's point of just wanting to get a full understanding and better understanding, focusing on the existing tools rather than rampaging on with innovation and how fast it goes and complicating things and adding layers. So just to step back and just understand what you do currently already. Yeah.
Sure. We are trying to keep everything local. So the only thing we have in the cloud is the data we're gathering, because it's so much. It's like terabytes of data, and I'm not keeping that on my computer. So
Yeah.
the only thing we're keeping in the cloud, or we're doing remotely, is that the data, and we're keeping it using Azure, Microsoft Azure. We have an account set up where everything we gather, we throw it in there. We have a data science member that cleans up all the data we gather, goes on there. Feel bad for him. He spends hours just looking all over that, pictures of nothing sometimes, cleaning all that. And when we get to train the models and put all that data to the test, we do it locally. We do it using either my computer if the computer that we use is not available, but mainly we like to call it the supercomputer because it has a bunch of really powerful NVIDIA GPUs in there that is hosted in campus, but it's our office. It doesn't have it. You need to swipe your card to get in. We train them there. We use locally trained YOLO models. We download the YOLO model into our computer and we train them locally. And all those models, we keep them inside of our own systems. So we train the model, we get the data we want to test, or we get the data that we trained with, we test the model, and that's the overall cycle. What we have come, or what we have been trying to do is make a workflow. Since we don't want to go over all the data by ourselves, all those terabytes of data, we have trained a really basic bare bones model at the beginning of the project using YOLO V11, I believe, that goes over all the data. And since it's very bare bones, it's not going to be very, very good or very, very accurate on what it does, but at least it's going to do something. And the ones that are really, really bad or that barely benefit us, it's just going to put it in a folder saying that we're not going to use this. And the ones that have potential to be used, it puts it in another folder. So then we have the data science guy go in that folder and analyze all that and see how that could benefit us. But yeah, we're keeping, in order to keep everything safe, secure, we do everything locally. Barely anything is on the cloud. And if it is on the cloud, it's on Azure. That's also coming from the request of the farmers themselves. They are very concerned about the data from their farm and they keep an eye on us.
Right.
And
That's something I
how
was about to bounce off of as well, just because we had discussed that in the previous conversation as well about them having privacy concerns with the data being uploaded to the cloud. So just to end that conversation, I had another thought that do you have storage issues with that or potentially any other kind of drawbacks with not uploading this data to the cloud? Since you did mention there's terabytes worth of data, are there any storage problems that you face, or is that not a concern?
as of right now, we haven't had problems with them because we're keeping it all in Azure. And Azure
Okay.
is a cloud-based system. Nittany AI is the one that takes care of all the Azure shenanigans and all of that. We just get in there, retrieve the data, and we don't have to worry about how much space that we have in there or anything.
Yeah, that's a good
So
problem to have. So yeah, that answers my question. I was just curious. Thank you for your time, and I really am fascinated by your project. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. And guys, just a reminder, we do have 5 minutes. Please keep your questions concise. I hate to say it. I love the discussion. With that said, Logan, yeah, you had a question there.
Yes. Hi, Diego. Thank you so much for your time today. My question is kind of based off of Brooke and Catherine's questions. In terms of pest control, what is your opinion on pseudo-natural approaches like reintroducing predator populations like wolves to kind of combat the deer populations in the area?
I don't really see it as something beneficial because it might have effects on the ecosystem that we don't know about. Introducing species into ecosystems has proven to be something very dangerous and has proven to be something that has long-term effects on ecosystems that we know barely anything of yet.
Sorry, I should have specified. I meant reintroduction, like areas where wolves used to be prevalent, to control the deer populations, but they've kind of like died out due to either hunting or other associated problems with species in that area. So my question was more framed towards like reintroduction.
I'm sorry, give me a second. My phone's died. Did you repeat that question? I'm really sorry.
No, you're totally fine. I meant more like reintroduction, like reintroducing wolves to areas where they used to be prevalent, but aren't anymore due to like a number of reasons.
I haven't looked so far into reintroducing species, but that is a very interesting approach to doing things. I still think that reintroducing species, well, we would have to take into account the amount of time that they have been out of that ecosystem or that specific biome, but reintroducing species, I do think that if they have been out for a long time, it might have effects on the ecosystem that we still haven't thought about. But at the same time, it might be beneficial because those species leaving that ecosystem that might be the cause of the problem we have today. That is a very good thought. I haven't thought about it.
And one way to kind of quantify would be
Yeah,
models like yours.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. One way to kind of quantify like the before and the after effects of those species being there versus the species not being there, environments of two different sorts. Could be an answer to that could be models like yours to properly analyze, quantify, and understand if it is truly beneficial. And if it is, that could be a very, actually, Logan brings up very, very cool point. A natural way to combat these food security issues by reintroducing species that were previously there before.
Yeah, for sure.
Very, very interesting. Yeah. Efras, you had a question. We will be running out of time. This is officially the end of the meeting, but Diego, if you have a couple more minutes, for those of us who want to stay on a couple more minutes for one last question, that would be very, very gracious of the rest of us.
Yes. Hello everyone. Yeah, I would like to begin greeting everyone and thanking you for the opportunities to ask a question on this occasion. My name is Epaphras Gibbs, and I am a journalist, and I have a degree in diplomacy from INDC of University in AD. My question is, how can small countries use digital diplomacy to strengthen then presently on the international stage, promote the national interest and protect the sovereignty.
Sorry, could you repeat your question for a second? I think you did cut out for a second.
Yes, I'm so sorry because I can speak fluently French, Creole, but English is not high level for me. But my
That's
question
okay.
is, how can small countries use digital diplomacy to
Yes.
strengthen their presence on the international stage, promote their national interest, and protect the sovereignty. Sovereignty, SOVEREEGNTE. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Evers, I actually very much applaud and appreciate your sort of effort into actually communicating this very, very cool question that you have. I wish you were there at our last week's SDG conversation circle. I'd love to kind of tackle this question a little bit and then pass it on to Diego on what you think on the technical side of things. Our first one was on zero poverty, and we actually talked about how AI can actually help us decode and understand and like we said, quantify certain sort of metrics and insights from local populations whose voices are reflected at a global stage. And oftentimes when local representatives, delegates from the global south go into bigger sort of stages in the world, especially in the UN General Assembly, the HPLF, or HLPF in New York City, they are voicing their opinions. For example, indigenous people, we were kind of specifically talking about, they voice their opinions and their thoughts on their own communities and how these, what sort of challenges these communities face, especially one of the biggest challenges being food security. A lot of these conversations and discussions get lost in translation, and a lot of them get lost in this world we live in full of data, and they become just one of the files in a giant cabinet full of a lot of different folders that will never be looked at again. And we were actually talking about how AI can help us sort of pull from those very documents and not have them lost. And that's something that AI has the capability to do. And us human minds going back, ruffling through drawers worth of folders, is just an impractical solution. And having them, like you said, digital diplomacy, I loved that term actually. As someone who's in the diplomacy space, and the technology side of things, I think it's a great intersection of both, where you leverage technology to kind of refer back to certain documents, to voices that were upheld in certain conferences or stages that you can now go back to, refer back to, and review what you've promised, review what you've talked about, review if you have kept up on promises that you've made in terms of talking about global leaders out there. So if that kind of sort of tackles your question in a little bit, I think that would be an incredible way to go about using digital diplomacy for the benefit of, to uphold and not forget the voices of the global South. And Diego, if you have something to add in terms of food security or AI or your project specifically, I'd love.
Yeah, definitely. I do think your answer is really, really good. That is something
Thank
that
you.
I agree with a lot. And something else I would like to add. Actually being from a developing country myself, being from the Dominican Republic, I think that implementing technology, this might not be as much in the realm of digital diplomacy, but it would be in the realm of using technology to improve the development of countries. I do think, and I really believe that education plays a really, really, really big factor on improving the current state of a country, or at least the presence of a country in the global aspect. And it just improving the, I don't want to say improving the country itself, but in a way, improving the
Yes.
quality of life of the country. I do think that
Yeah.
technology
Yeah.
has a
Culture,
really,
etc.
Mhm. I do think that technology has a really big role to play in education in those countries. And I believe that if technology is implemented in a really efficient way, and if it can be implemented in a way that education could be brought to, let's say, low income areas in those countries, it can really improve the quality of life in those countries. Technology, especially AI right now, utilizing AI to make it accessible for people, for making education accessible to people, using AI for making education understandable, because a really big problem for those countries is that education is not really, let's say, affordable. Teachers don't really have that good of a salary. So utilizing AI to sort of, um I don't want to take the role of teachers. I don't want to take their jobs, but utilizing AI in order to act as educators in those low income countries would be very cost effective, I believe, if implemented in the correct way, and can bring sort of a baseline from where people can be interested in these topics and can have at least a certain, let's say, base to their education.
Okay.
Very, very cool.
Very
Everett,
good. Thank you.
so much for your question. That was a very cool one to end of the discussion, Diego. Thank you for kind of providing sort of a global insight on and using kind of your background on where you come from as well, to tackle a question of this sort. I actually really wish you were there in the first conversation circle, we talked about specifically something along those lines. Efros, I would love for you to kind of be at the education SDG, quality education. I think equal quality education as well. I think that's week 4 coming up. So we'll be touching base on topics of these sort a lot more. Jerry, is this a question for the discussion, or I'd love if you could keep it a little concise. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I want to continue with the diplomacy question, which is on the, on the geopolitics and AI, because obviously, we wish to live in a beautiful world, but then currently, the world is getting more fragmented. The U.S. is retreating from the global leadership, and we are coming from different countries here, and U.S. also has a changing attitude towards some countries now. So I'm just curious. Yeah, you guys are doing this for a while, and the sustainability has now kind of been going down in the U.S. and globally. I'm curious with us with some international backgrounds, how could we navigate this stability and all that?
Yeah, I'll take on it, since it not necessarily particular to the specific SDG, but in a global sense, one of the coolest examples is my experience with UNA USA last summer. There was a bill that was there were multiple bills actually being kind of thrown around in Congress. We had a lobby day for UNA USA. Catherine, you would remember this last summer, where a lot of sort of a lot of efforts were being taken from the White House to the Hill to block aid and dues worth over $400 million that would go towards United Nations, go to the United Nations, as a lot of which would go towards UN Refugee Agency to help people in Gaza, Sudan, as well as in Ukraine. But because of the current United States political climate, the local political climate here in this country, things were getting a lot more difficult than it should have. Just looking at it from a humane perspective to help humanity with coming from people who are like ourselves, who are I'm not ashamed to say privileged, a lot more privileged than a lot of our counterparts that are who are from the global south, and a lot of us coming from the global south living in the global north understand and empathize with those still living back home. And our lobby efforts actually kind of led to, I think, if I remember the numbers correctly, I think over $75 million in dues and aids that we were able to send and change minds of people in the Hill, regulators, including senators, as well as representatives in the Congress building. So it was actually a very surreal experience, and just a testimony to show how grassroots level sort of activists, so to say, like ourselves here, can actually make global impact and send $75 million. None of us, I doubt, have $75 million in our bank account to send to the United Nations that would essentially help out places like Sudan, Gaza, and Ukraine. But we do have, platforms like these to lobby and to change minds of those that are taking these decisions. So that was one of the biggest factors for me to fully nosedive into diplomacy, and kind of realizing how impactful it can actually be from a grassroots level, and how things can actually bring change. We joke around in school, like, dude, yeah, sure, you're doing a video call on Zoom, like it's gonna change a lot of things in the world. Funny enough, it does, because I realized that last summer, and that's why I do it. So I'd love for the rest of us to kind of continue and take that as a little bit of an inspiration, I guess. And yeah, that was I guess my piece. Didn't have to do with this specific SDG, and we are over 12 minutes, so into the end of discussion. But for those of us who kind of stayed back, really appreciate your time past our talking time. But Diego, thank you so much. Jerry, really appreciate your question. Everest, thank you so much, as well as the rest of us in audience who helped kind of carry the conversation. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. This was
Thank you
very
too.
Yeah, everyone.
yeah.
Thank you too. Mhm.